So, in one of my last shows, I was talking about the rules that Gurdjieff talks about, and I'm currently reading with Gurdjieff in St. Petersburg and Paris by Anna Butkowski Hewitt. And she happens to come across, or does a chapter on reels, which I thought was quite interesting since I'd only just been talking about them, and a few days later I'm reading. So I'm going to read this chapter, but I'm going to follow it with this because you will see the spelling, it's very important. So she writes in the chapter Rules. By degrees, the members of our small group became so accustomed to meeting one another every day and living in an atmosphere pervaded by mysticism that our search for the fourth dimension and our interest in kindred subjects acted like a narcotic. In time, it grew to be an absolute necessity to us. If, as happened very rarely, Gurdjieff did not arrange a meeting for the following day, then we would meet without him. In those summer nights, although when we all saw one another home, we often walked about till 2 or 3 in the morning. Still, the next day we would turn up as usual to meet Gurdjieff at the cafe at noon. We did not always satisfy our exacting taskmaster in our gropings after the truth, far from it. I remember one evening when we happened to be gathered together at a friend's house, with Gurdjieff sitting cross-legged on a large settee, that he turned to Ouspensky and said, "Now, you tell me something about what I was trying to hammer into your heads yesterday about impressions and reels. I will smoke and listen." Ouspensky cleared his throat, hummed and hawed, self-consciously put on an expression like an experienced lecturer and began, it is difficult, well nigh impossible, for civilized humanity with its deep-rooted ideas to assimilate new ones. Perhaps we are disciples of Auguste Comte, or we may become attached to the ideas of Thomas à Kempis, or possibly we are influenced by reading about the Rosicrucians or by the doctrines of theosophy. We are all products of our destructive civilization. Gurdjieff stopped him with an impatient gesture. "Whatever is this rubbish you're talking?" he shouted. Then he shrugged his shoulders and turned to the rest of us. "I suppose he wants to show off his knowledge. He's exactly like a cow going round and round a new gate without being able to find the way in. God preserve us from such people. Anna, you try." I was taken by surprise, because I was not at all accustomed to talking in public, but I answered in a low, although to my astonishment, firm voice. "I will do my best to repeat what Georgy Ivanovich was saying to us yesterday. Man absorbs impressions from the outside world and what Gurdjieff calls reels, receiving and winding on impressions from without, as if on cotton reels or spools. Then from these impressions, man gradually develops his habits and inclinations, his tastes, his longings. From earliest childhood, their influence affects him. By the same rule, the negative qualities are formed, dislikes, idiosyncrasies, and so on. A child who has a musical father, for instance, and who constantly hears music played and talked about at home, although by nature he may not be musical, may develop a musical skill because these impressions are wound on his reels. Of course, other impressions will be there too, but not so strongly. At some period in his life, his surroundings or circumstances may change. Then, perhaps, there will be wound on his reels, instead of his father's musical impressions, his mother's complaints about lack of money. New conditions will create new impressions, but it may happen that later in life some deep forgotten impression may come through to the surface and will be a deciding factor in forming the life of the individual. And so it follows that when we speak of I doing or thinking something, often it is not the true I, because all the work is being done by the reels, rather like recording for a gramophone. Only through suffering or rubbing, as Georgy Ivanovich calls it, is the true I born. Till that happens, we react like parrots and throw out the impressions we have gathered and stored up in a distorted form, believing it is a creative process. So Gurdjieff calls such a person a real man. He says that was spoken by your wills, not by your I. And so he must develop the real I. Real man. Here Gurdjieff stopped me. Enough. Somewhere near the truth. Nicholas, repeat that. He turned to the elderly, long-bearded man sitting nearby, who was shading his eyes with his hand. Nicholas started awake, looking rather like a schoolboy caught in the act of doing something he shouldn't. He was embarrassed, tried to collect himself, and began stammering. A real man is someone who is, when... To this day, I can recall that perturbed, unhappy face, and the way everyone else looked on, sympathetic but helpless. Have you had a nice nap? Then why come to us here? And to think how you begged me to take you on. What are you grinning at? Snapped Gurdjieff, turning to another of the group. Now you tell us what you heard and understood yesterday. But at this unlucky moment our host appeared, inviting us to go into the dining room to take tea and refreshments. Gurdjieff turned on us with an explosion of wrath. Now this beats everything, he roared. Oh, God-seekers indeed. You want a fourth, eighth dimension? Three are not enough for you. Mystics indeed. The best thing for you all would be to be put in gaol, and perhaps after a little suffering and discomfort you might understand when to speak and what to say. It seems that taking tea is far more important for you than seeking the truth. Well, drink your healths in it, by yourselves. And he swept out of the room, slamming the door behind him. We all sat there as if paralysed. No one moved. Silently we remembered that often before he had threatened to leave us because of our laziness and lack of will to learn. Below we heard the hall door bang. Suddenly Ouspensky, as if shaking himself out of a dream, leapt to his feet and dashed down the stairs after Gurdjieff. Ouspensky described to me afterwards how, when he caught up with Gurdjieff in the street and tried to reason with him, he had the greatest difficulty in persuading him not to abandon us. He begged him to have mercy on the group for the sake of one righteous man, as in Sodom and Gomorrah. Gurdjieff, in a sceptical voice, asked him, "But is there really one righteous person among you? Who is it then? Supposing you lumped yourself and Anna together, and then added the other four, maybe out of that there might come, not a whole, but half a righteous person. Maybe. All right then. And only because all six of you are sincerely hungry for knowledge, not for any other reason. Very well, come tomorrow to Filipov's. You and Anna come at noon, and the others come when they can in the evening." Next day, Ouspensky and I were, of course, at the cafe even before noon. We sat, chastened, waiting at our usual table in the corner until Gurdjieff appeared. "Good day to you, half of a righteous one," he greeted us gaily, taking his usual place. "And what shall we talk about today?" We remained silent and abashed for several minutes. We all sat drinking our coffee without a word. At last Gurdjieff, with a rather melancholy smile, began to talk. "Maybe you, Ouspensky and Anna, are more than half pravdikny righteous, because you can keep still. You are capable of quenching your burning desire to ask unnecessary questions. Statements can wait. You can sit without talking, but try to explain that to Nicholas Alexandrovich. He always shouts out everything that comes into his head. Explain to him about control, about discipline in talking and where to stop, about simplification, abbreviation, throwing out not only superfluous words but also the ideas themselves, which need dusting out and tire the thinking apparatus. Yours and that of the person you are talking to. One needs to know both what and how to speak." He added to the pair of us, "Do you understand what I meant by the reals?" "More or less," replied Ouspensky. "And you, Anna Ilishnia?" "I don't know if I really do." "Very bad. You must know. No one can be uncertain whether they want to eat or not. It's yes or no. And it's the same with this, so let's straighten it out together." Then Gurdjieff went on to explain. "You presume that you have a genuine I, no? You have not, because all your ideas and actions are the results of recordings on your reels. You have 33 reels. Today you see something is red, tomorrow you say that same thing is green. That is because a different eye is speaking. One may have 17 eyes, another may have more, and some have only 3, for eating, for sleeping, and for the sexual urge. To have 33 may or may not be an advantage. It depends on whether it is worth winding on those reels. Suppose a man wants to become, say, a lecturer. It may be a good thing and lead to success because of many of the qualities of his real impressions. Or through them he may instead turn out just a chatterbox. That's bad. Look at Nicholas. Anything he sees or hears he grabs with both hands, shouts about it. Then he hears something else and forgets the first thing, so nothing in him settles down. He earns nothing either for himself or for anyone else. When a man has as many reels as there are subjects to talk about, he can't see daylight, and no wonder if he is hazy about everything. We must learn to absorb from the outer world and give out again chiefly one impression, one which concerns our chief occupation, and perhaps a few, very few sidelines. When we meet people, we must refuse to pay too much attention to what they say, but politely or impolitely ignore them. As you might put it, let everything go in at one ear and come out at the other. Sometimes there is simply no time to ignore such things politely, for we must run after the object which is important to us if we are to catch it. Now it's here at hand, we can seize it. Half a minute later it will be too late, out of reach, and someone else into whose neighbourhood it has shifted may grasp it. Then the first man will stand looking at the second like a Doric imbecile. He'll watch him, spy on him, and at last will see what he has accomplished. On this foundation, which seems heaven sent, the second has built his life, while the first man only looks on, licking his lips with envy. One must know how to achieve swiftly, grasp the object, and never let go. For will there ever be another opportunity? Probably never. And when it's been lost, a man will try to satisfy himself with some kind of imitation of what is lost. Paradise lost. According to his talent and intellect, sometimes it may work, sometimes not. But then he too will start trying to preach about it to others. From preachers like that, Lord deliver us. Gurdjieff continued, and we listened. There is also another way to succeed in our strivings and longings, less dramatic than the first way. That is to have within oneself something like a savings box in which one puts observations and facts collected from one's life. One meets people who are interesting or useful to one's particular purpose and accumulates them in one's savings box like coins, one after another. Then one day there will be enough collected to sort it all out, make mental notes, and perhaps, here again, it all depends on a man's other qualities. One may make use of it as a foundation for life. Now you, Anna, are studying music. One cannot be always learning and listening and watching others play. One must play oneself. This you do, and even in public. But even better is your composing. You can extemporize. That is good. One has to make real efforts, personal efforts, not merely imitate. Let's take an instance. Supposing one day, while you are improvising at your piano, one of your girlfriends arrives in the middle and asks you to go out with her to buy a new hat. And supposing that she too has left some job undone at home, something important like working for a final examination on which her whole life depends, perhaps even the lives of all her family as well. All thrown away after the 99th effort. All lost because, though she has done so much already, she grew tired as if the 100th part was not of vital importance, forgetting that only the 100th part can complete the whole, like closing a circle. So then it remains unfinished, and everything, the other 99 parts as well, is wasted. The purpose, the sacrifices, time, everything. I say it again, the efforts to attain this purpose will be lost because that would have become the means of many other things as well, either dreamed of or undreamed of. You, Anna Elishnia, always would have wound up on your own reels your friend's stupidity about going out to buy the hat. Nothing good would have come of it, only more harm and waste of time. Yes, all would sink to hopeless depths. He added, as a summing up, one must be loyal to the most important, most cherished object in one's life, and must never betray it. With this, Gurdjieff ended, and he began to drink a fresh cup of coffee. Coffee! Ha ha! Couldn't even say the last word. But I wanted to read that because I was discussing rules before and how we take them in. And I think it's quite important that we understand the difference between a real man and a real man, R-E-A-L. Are the rules misleading us, or are we using them productively? Are we filling our reels, our recordings, with good positive work, or are we filling it with mechanical workings? Obviously it's down to the individual, but I wanted to make this little recording of that chapter because I thought it was quite important after where I was discussing reels the other day. So thanks all for watching and listening, and may your work and your reels continue in the most positive of ways and help you become a real, R-E-A-L, man or woman.